Where rivers and running water started to make a deep meaning for me was as a child. My father was a salmon fisherman. I lived in Fredericton. He used to take me over to the Miramichi River with him, and sometimes we went over there as a family. And I used to love to sleep out on the veranda of a log cabin which overlooked the Miramichi. The others were all inside, but I'd sleep out at night in a cot on the veranda. And waking up in the morning and, well, at nighttime, hearing the sounds of whippoorwills. You don't hear those so much anymore, but the sound of whippoorwills and salmon jumping in the river at night. And then waking up in the morning, and often there was a mist over the river or a mist lifting off the river, and I would hear the sounds of the call of crows through the mist, and the sound of osprey fishing over the river. And that had a very deep spiritual impact on me. And that was closely related to time that I spent on MacDougall Lake, which is a lake south of Fredericton. It has a YMCA camp on it, which I was associated with as a boy. And there was something of the same experience there, and remembering particularly a little adventure that some friends of mine and myself went out there and camped at the lake, at the Y camp. And waking up in the morning again with mist on the lake and the sound of loons calling through the dark at night and through the mists in the morning, and the way the mist lifted off the lake in the morning. Those experiences and those images and the fragrance of nature in the sense of the freshness of air and of water, and thinking, I've always, as I've grown up and became aware of what was happening in the world, I realized that all lakes are part of river systems. And I always become aware in my mind geographically of where did this lake come from and where is it going. So I always had a sense of it as a river system, as part of a river system. So those experiences made a deep impression on me, probably the deepest spiritual impression of my life. When I was working with young people's groups, particularly at Tattamagush a number of years ago, we always used to have exercises where we would say to people, tell us your story. Where does your spiritual sense of yourself come from? And there was a time when in joining into that, I would try to find religious experience. And I could do that all right. But I thought that these experiences of nature were really not what even I was asking of these young people. But as time went on, I began to realize they're more deep than my religious experience in church or something I'd at that time would have called religious or spiritual. Now it's much more of a whole to me. But so what I'm trying to say there is that the experience of nature, particularly on or near water and river systems in particular, was deeply meaningful to me in terms of my sense of who I was and my love of God. If God was like this, I can relate to him. I might not be able to relate so well with the God of church, but with God as experienced in nature, I knew that God. That's personal, direct. And another experience I'll relate, this is a story of standing on a beaver dam fishing in the evening as the sun was going down. It was a very beautiful sunset. And this was when I was in grade 11, I guess, or 12. And remembering a poem of Wordsworth that we were studying in school, which was deeply meaningful to me in the sense that it gave more sense to these earlier experiences I had had. I have felt a presence which excites me with the joy of elevated thought, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling place is the light of setting suns and the round ocean and the living air and the blue sky and the heart of humanity, an energy and a spirit which rolls through all things. And that kind of named it for me, the sense of a presence far more deeply interfused. And so I've carried that into my adult life, where I've done a lot of canoeing with young people, first of all, with families, and most recently with groups of men in the wilderness, and particularly in some of the rivers of northern New Brunswick, the Upsloquitch in particular. Very beautiful rivers, and traveling through what seems to me to be pristine country. And they all up in northern New Brunswick have very deep valleys. And you can look up as you're floating down the river, and I can remember myself saying over and over again, wow, 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 the beauty of it. And it's that sense of beauty and groundedness or oneness with all of that, which I relate now most closely to what I think of as a contemplative way of being, which is simply being open in the present moment and just being there with what is. And notice that O'Donoghue speaks of as a river, as, how was it? It was the quote you used, Janet, fluid presence through landscape. And that's true for me, but it also feels like fluid presence through time. Because you realize those ancient river valleys they've been around at least since the last ice age, but probably much longer than that. And so the sense of being carried along with what feels like almost a living organism that takes me not only through landscape, which is beautiful enough, but also through a sense of time. And so that experience of river and water and beauty takes me deep into God, and I don't have to work at it. That's not a spiritual practice in any effortful sense. It is a spiritual practice, but spontaneous and loving and appreciative. This is a poem I wrote after a canoe trip on the Upsloquitch River, which is in northern New Brunswick, and I called it Curve of the Upsloquitch, in the sense it's written from the perspective of sitting in a canoe, coming around a curve in the river and looking down river at another curve coming up. Rounding the curve and looking up through time, what base is there for seeing clear for ground? Gratitude wraps its love through ancient forest, drifts with beauty over darkened river, and with greenness makes its play for depth. Yet always there is that further lure of deeps in time not known, calling for simple presence and warriored willingness to go.